Ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
Are you ready? No, I'm an Andrea.
You're an Andrea? Oh my god. That's definitely
I like it.
This is the moonnco podcast, where we help you take back control of your well-being and regain your mental clarity. Join our growing community for resources, support, and guidance at moonnco.com. This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the moonnco podcast. Today we are going to talk about integrative health. What is it? And just kind of a background on it, since some people might not even be familiar with it. 3 or 4 years ago, I really wasn't familiar with it. I knew there were these arenas of kind of alternative medicine. But
I'm still not sure I fully understand it.
well, hopefully this will help. That's what we're here for. So wanted to just talk about that and also our experience with it and how it kind of formed and molded part of the brand. And so I think that's it.
Awesome. Sounds great. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Okay.
All right. So where do we dive in? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what integrative health is to start?
I think so, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's a good spot. So integrative health is an approach that really looks at the whole person holistically and tries to identify root cause issues for people's ailments, issues, whatever. It's also called, can be referred to as functional medicine, integrative medicine, right? Kind of the same thing. So it's really, the goal is to work with the individual, do functional lab testing to uncover root cause issues, like I said, and then rebalance the body and help to make lifestyle, diet changes, sleep changes. It's not just labs and supplements, that's a big part of it, but it also is lifestyle, stress. Diet is a big one, which obviously we're passionate about, as we've already kind of talked about, right? But diet is a big one, but that's not the only one. There's the stress on your body, which can be emotional stress, right? Mental health stress, which kind of moves over into Nick's sphere, but also just stress in the sense of you might have bacteria that is living in your body or pathogens that are living in your body that are causing stress on your body, right? So stress is a very general term that can mean a lot of things, right? And so it's trying to figure out what is the stress that is affecting you specifically or your family specifically, and then trying to resolve that stress to bring your body back into a balanced state so that your body can function the way it should. Because a lot of these stresses, right, have been shown that they cause a lot of different ailments and symptoms that people are living with.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense, and I appreciate that overview. I mean, I guess it may be helpful to kind of take a step back in terms of, there's sort of medical doctors, right, MDs, that are kind of the traditional, Western medicine path,
Mm-hmm.
That most people go to for, I've got an earache, I've got a, whatever the symptom may be. And then there's sort of DOs, which I don't even know that I know what that acronym stands for, but I do know that the difference between like an MD and a DO is that an MD is really looking at like the symptoms and is really looking at, kind of what those, different, doctor of, how do you pronounce that?
Osteopathic medicine.
Osteopathic medicine. Okay. So a doctor of osteopathic medicine, which is really looking at the whole person, right, and the whole individual as the treatment process, as opposed to an MD that's really looking at a symptom and is really going down this clinical route. That's right. Is that that kind of difference?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this sort of principle of integrative health, which is sort of aligned with the DO's approach, that they're looking at the holistic individual. They're not looking strictly at the symptoms. They're looking a little bit more at the underlying causes, but they're not looking at balancing the stress levels or the, looking at a supplement plan or a dietary plan or a sort of any of those principles. Do I have that about right?
Yeah, I agree with that stance. I think a DO, looks more at the whole person, which in my opinion is, great, as opposed to just looking at a symptom, right? So it's looking at the whole person, but it's still Western trained doctor, right, that is, trained on a clinical kind of path, and but still has some of those whole person.
They can still prescribe medications.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Whereas integrative health, you're not providing a diagnosis,
No.
right? You're not necessarily providing medications, but you are looking holistically at supplement plans and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's definitely a very clear distinction. Not diagnosing, not curing, not those are the big ones, right? We're not diagnosing anything or curing anything, right? It's about just looking at what could be the underlying root cause issues that could be causing these ailments or symptoms or disease, and trying to help a person to rebalance, right? And kind of hopefully within that you could resolve some of the issues that you're having, right? And not always. And it's like, that's a very important part, is an integrative health person is not a doctor, is not a DO, right? Is not an MD. So it's a different approach to it. With the same goal, I think all of these practitioners, right? The goal is to help people feel better. It's just each person has a different toolbox and a different toolkit. And so I think I would say that, for my opinion, that's the distinction, right? Everyone has their own toolbox to help. And the whole point of this, right? The whole point of moonnco, right, is to give people a bigger toolbox, a bigger toolkit, a bigger, list of resources. And so in an ideal world, someone working with an integrative practitioner or a functional practitioner or an alternative healer still has a PCP, right? You still have a doctor. If you have specific areas in your body that are out of balance that you've been working on for years with a specialist, right, like a GI doctor or a neurologist or someone, right, that you've already been working with. It's the idea is not to cut out anyone, it's to really integrate them all together, right? So like, even though specifically in our situation with our family, right, our daughter has a GI doctor, right, as we've talked about in prior episodes, right, but we also work with a integrative, functional practitioner, and she has a pediatrician. So within the last few weeks, we've actually talked to all three of those parties, right, about various things. She had a regular checkup with her pediatrician. She had a periodic checkup with her GI, and then we did some lab testing. So then I looped in our functional practitioner too, because she knows a lot of the history. So even though I'm getting certified in this and I'm almost done with my training, like, I still trust very high, we really have a lot of faith and really trust our practitioner. And I'm still I'm just learning still, right? I'm still in the beginning, but
even that, I mean, that third party perspective is always valuable. And I think that kind of again, just speaks to, one of the things that we feel so strongly about, which is like getting all the information from all the various parties, and not just taking one sort of word for it, or not even taking your own voice within there, right? Like that is an important factor, but it's not like the only thing. I mean, even not this episode's about integrative health, but I mean, even on the mental health and meditation, spirituality side, there is still, even though I've been exploring it for many years and have gone through training programs and all of this, like, there is still a lot of value to having a spiritual advisor, through having a mental health coach for myself, for, just because it gives you that different perspective.
Yeah, right.
Do we want to talk a little bit about lab testing and sort of the things that integrative health practitioners look at from a lab's perspective?
Yeah, that's super helpful, I think. So I think that is one data point that can be super helpful. I find it super interesting. Nick knows, like, we've all done, our daughter, and then we've also done some lab testing, and there's more things that I would like to do, just because I find it so fascinating, to do some of this testing, because you can get, and some of this you can get done with your PCP, right? And it's, some of that is, we would like to give people tools or guidance on, if you're having these issues, these are some things you may want to look into. You can do it with the help of me, I can help with that, or going to your doctor too, if that's an option, is always out there. But let's
pause there on that, because that is an important point, right, that we've learned, is that, so one thing we should clarify is that integrative health practitioners typically aren't covered by insurance.
Right.
And so a lot of these labs are out-of-pocket expenses.
And the time that you're spending with the practitioner too is most likely, and some of the supplements, right? It's all out-of-pocket costs,
right,
for the most part.
Right. So I raise that point because some of these labs, if you can work with your PCP to put them through the insurance, it can really ease that financial burden of working with a health practitioner. And I found that even within myself. Now, I will say, there are actually times where it has been more cost efficient to run a lab independently through the IHP than through the insurance.
Right.
We've actually seen scenarios where it hit our deductible, which makes sense, but the way the calendar year spun, it was actually going to be more cost effective to just run it outright as opposed to having to hit our deductible. So there are some interesting nuances there. So it's not, there is definitely a real cost associated with it, but just thought I'd raise that point.
Yeah, no, that was a point that I definitely wanted to bring up too, is, it's in both of our certifications, right, there's a lot of, and more on your side actually, but there's a lot of push towards having some of these things covered, either if not by your insurance, at least HSA, FSA eligible, because these things are expensive, and if people are really dealing with a lot of health issues, they are already probably spending a lot of money, even if they have good insurance. They're still paying a lot of money out of pocket. So the idea of adding on something else that isn't covered by insurance, that you're going to have to pay up front, is daunting, right? When we started working with the practitioner that we have, we basically said, okay, she was able to give us kind of a breakdown of, this is what my initial kind of package is, or how it works. Here's the labs I recommend. You're probably going to need, you may need some supplements at that point. And we had a number all in of, okay, we're probably going to spend this much money out of pocket. Are we okay with that? And to be honest, at that time, I would have spent 5 times that, because we were so just wanting to find out more and more and more, and we had gone through all of the conventional things. So, but that's totally valid. Is the goal is not to, in an ideal world, there's a certain set of labs that would be great for every single person to run, just to see, and we'll kind of talk about that. But in reality, in the real world, do people have that money to do? So then it's, do we pick and choose the ones that would be the most informative? Or if lab testing and the cost is just completely off the table, then it's trying to come up with a plan just based on your symptoms and your history, right? And trying to try different things to see what works, right? Could take a lot longer because you're more trial and error in that instance, right? But
yeah, no, I the point I was going to make is, and we're kind of going a little off script here, but I think this is a good conversation, and we'll probably do an entire episode solely on some of these nuances. Like, Andrew is a CPA, we've worked through these numbers a million different ways, and there are some tips and tricks on kind of how to manage this from a financial perspective. But one of the things that's important, just to kind of hammer this point home, from a moonnco brand perspective, is this is part of the reason why it's super important for each individual and you to take control of your own kind of story and journey with this, is because as you start to go down this path, as we've learned and as you just kind of hit on, is that being able to have a cost containment mindset of, okay, I know that going to my IHP, my integrative health practitioner is going to be an out-of-pocket expense, and so like, I want to get the most out of that 15-minute, 30-minute, hour session, whatever it may be, that you can possibly get. And so any upfront research that you can go in there with will help you to spend less money, because you're not going to be spending money to get information and resources that are available to you for free online. It's a daunt, and I think like there's 2 areas in life where, like, medical and legal are areas where people tend to go like, oh, I don't know, right? But like, that information is there, and if you're curious, you can dive in. And then when you go and you have these sessions with a practitioner that's expensive, or a mental health coach that's expensive and isn't covered by insurance, like, you can get the most out of that time, so you don't walk out of there feeling like, man, I just spent a bunch of money on something that isn't providing results.
And I think that's our goal with all of our content, right? Is the idea is that we want to give away as much free content as we can to our community, so that you already have that baseline education to do with it whatever you will, right? Even if it's not working with us. But to Nick's point, having conversations with your doctor, having conversations with the insurance company, making more calculated decisions when you go to the grocery store and the pharmacy. Like, our goal is to provide as much free content as we can. And then if someone gets to the point where they feel like, okay, I have a direction, I kind of know, I have some interest here and some knowledge base, and then it's okay, well, now I'm willing to pay someone who is a professional who's trained in this to take it to the next level and help if there are testing that you want to do, that you can order it through me. There are other ways to do it, but we've gone to our PCP or to our specialist too and said, hey, this is something that we're interested in looking into, and sometimes they're dismissive. They're like, I don't know, that's not really something we need to look at. It's like, but if I'm telling you I want to look at this,
but
why are you,
Yeah, but I will say, like, I don't disagree with your point, but I will say that, like, I've had somewhat of the opposite experience where I've gone into my PCP after seeing our integrative health practitioner and going and saying, these are the things that my integrative health specialist is is looking to dive in deeper on because of these symptoms. And I've had my PCP say, like, yes, let's 100% check these and this, but this one, I don't know that I can get that test ordered, or this may not be worthwhile. And it becomes more of a conversation. And then I can walk away and I come on to both of those appointments saying, okay, yep, we're going to run down this route and I'm going to get this lab from my PCP because insurance is going to cover it. And this lab is going to be super expensive to run through my insurance anyway. It's going to be a lot less expensive running it through my integrative health specialist, so I'm going to get that lab there. And this one, I kind of agree with my PCP's point that, like, this isn't a concern because X, Y, and Z, and I'm curious to see what my integrative health specialist, and it becomes a lot more of a fluid conversation, and you're able to not only optimize your health, which is the ultimate goal, but also feel like you are not financially being raked over the coals, whether it's from an insurance perspective or an out-of-pocket perspective.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and I like the point you made of having it be a collaborative approach, and I think that is just ideal. That's the ideal situation, right? You have a PCP that's open to listening to what you're working on with another provider, right? You have a specialist who's also, so in the case of our daughter, right, when we go to the GI doctor, she's a specialist in, she's a GI doctor, right? So we go to her, but we'll say, hey, we did this test with our functional practitioner. This is what it showed. Or she's having, we did a stool analysis and it showed this and that. We're sharing the results with both parties, right? So that everyone knows what's going on. And we're saying, well, we're going to do this probiotic because it showed that she was low in this one strain of bacteria in her gut, right? And the GI is like, okay, sounds great. Like, I don't really have anything else to add to that. I don't have any issue with that. Just keep me in the loop. And then same on the functional side, right? We'll tell her, yeah, we met with her GI and she's recommending this, that, and whatever. And she's like, yep, that sounds great. Like, just let me know where I can plug in and help. And same with the pediatrician. We went to her this week with some symptoms that our daughter was having, and she recommended an approach. And we weren't totally sure. We were like, that sounds right, but let's check it with the functional practitioner. So I shot her a note to get her opinion, and she totally agreed. Move forward, done. And now everyone's in the loop. We had blood work done this week for her as well. So, like, we'll share that. The GI has it because the order came from her. We'll share it with her functional practitioner. The pediatrician really doesn't need to see it, but I did tell her high level what the results were, right? But it's having, like, a really good organic collaboration is vital. And I think if any one of your team, if any one of those people are not willing to collaborate with another part of your team, that's a red flag.
Huge
to me.
red flag.
And I would say, unless you really, really trust that person fully, you may want to swap out some players on your
100%,
team, right? Like,
100%. And that's across the board. No matter who you're working with, if you're working with an integrative health specialist, you're working with a PCP, you're working with a medical specialist, you're working with a mental health coach, you're working with a therapist.
Yeah.
Any of those that aren't open to collaboration with other certified professionals, or they're telling you you don't need this, you only need this, huge red flag.
Yeah. We definitely had issues with this where early on in our daughter's journey, we had a GI doctor that we said we were getting a second opinion from another doctor, and she wasn't against it, but she just really wasn't open to it. She really didn't want to collaborate.
Some of that, I think, is the resistance to alternative healing and alternative health,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is a very real challenge that you face when you go down this path.
Yes, definitely.
But nonetheless, I mean, and again, it circles back to having the data and going into those conversations with data to support your theories. And like the more we have those conversations, those practitioners were a little bit more open-minded to it. But the reality is you're dealing with people who are highly intelligent, who are highly accomplished, and some have a little bit of, and a lot of ego, right? And so that's where, for us, like our approach is not necessarily that one is good or one is bad or that one is right or one is wrong. Like we just want to talk to smart people about hard problems and make the right decision.
Yeah.
And so
right.
you want to create a team in which that's the dynamic, because anything other than that, like, is just going to frustrate you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, the main takeaway from this section is exactly what you said of you want the strongest team with the smartest people that are all invested in your health, and it takes different people with different toolkits. So I think this gives you another option too, like Nick said, take more accountability for your health, be more invested in your health, make sure that whatever your health journey is and whatever you are embarking on is something that you are fully committed to as well, because if you've done the research, you've done the digging in, you've done as much research as you can, asked as many questions as you can, you're going to be more invested in it, rather than you go to the doctor and they might say, okay, well, this is your option, you can take this medication, you can change your diet, you can do this. And you have no idea what the pros and cons of each are. You don't know what the medications are. You don't know what the diet would entail. You just are like, I don't know, which one do you think? And they might say, well, take the medication because it's easier and you don't have to just, and I think that happens sometimes where people aren't knowledgeable of it. And I've had this happen where you're in a doctor's office and they recommend something to you and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And then I just clam up and then I think like, oh no, I don't know anything about this and I want to go research it before I make a decision. And that happens sometimes, but doctors are always very receptive to that too, of like, hey, I need to process this. I need to do some research. I want to dig in more before I commit one way or the other. Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to sit there at that point in time and do the thing, right? Like you don't need to commit to anything, but I think.
But it's worth going. We're kind of belaboring this point, and we can move on to this. But like, I mean, I can remember a conversation I had with my PCP at one point where I was having like tingling in my hands, and we couldn't figure out what it was, right? And our integrative health specialist was like, I think it's a B12 deficiency. And there were a lot of other things that were kind of going on, and I have some neurological, trauma from the past of like I do have a medical history of neurological symptoms. So like, sensations and nerves and things of that nature are definitely a cause for, I wouldn't say concern, but a cause to.
It's alarming. Yeah.
It's alarming and something I need to take seriously. So she said it's a B12 deficiency. I went to see my PCP. My PCP also was like, I think it's a B12 deficiency, so let's run down this path. But if it's not, I can also prescribe you this thing that's a nerve suppressant so you won't feel that. And I was like, well, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to.
Can we just check on that other
Can we
thing
just check
first
on the other thing first? So, but like, because I'd had the conversation with the integrative health specialist first, I kind of already was in the mindset of like, okay, this likely isn't neurological. This likely isn't something, nerve related. Like, it's probably just a deficiency in my diet. And like, while my PCP, so I went into the conversation kind of already having a background of in a path that I kind of wanted to go down. And so I don't know. I just say that point to it just is, proves your point of like having those different perspectives can help you really make the right decision. So we've talked about that quite a bit. We've talked about labs a little bit. Was there anything more you wanted to add about kind of the approach of how labs are taken and what they look at, or?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I find it super fascinating. And basically, the second level of my certification is all about each section is on the different labs. So every time I learned about a new lab, I was like, oh, this lab is so interesting. We should do it. And Nick's like, oh my gosh, another one. Like, but it is like the data that you get, I find it fascinating. So there's different ones, all that you can do at home, right, for the group of tests of labs that I work with. So depending on what your symptoms are, would kind of dictate which labs you would want to do. If you want to do, there's a core group of them that are recommended for people, you could do that. But if you're having, digestive issues, like there's a big one is doing a comprehensive stool analysis. And we used to do stool studies on our daughter relatively frequently, but I feel like the comprehensive one that we've done through functional labs just gives you, pages of data.
So much more
and
data.
It's so interesting. And we might in the future break this up into like, okay, these labs are focused on these type of issues, go into a little more detail on it. But, it'll show you just deep level, like what are their pathogens, bacteria, what bacteria do you have? Is it good bacteria, bad bacteria? Do you have candida? Do you have yeast? Do you have what is your pH? It's so interesting. It's like 3 or 4 pages of stuff. And they're really easy to read, right? Like it tells you, here's the range of the normal range. Here's where you are. You're either in the range, you're out of the range, you're high, you're low. And it also gives a good kind of summary of what the lab shows, right? So even just seeing it on its own, you can make some understanding of it, right? But then talking through it with a professional is obviously going to give you more depth on that. But there's also an organic acids test that actually looks and sees like not what's in your body, but all the things that are excreted by your body. So it can kind of tell if you're excreting this acid, your body is probably high in this mineral, or it's low in this mineral. So your body's compensating by coming up with this other, counterbalance to that. And food sensitivity one. This is one that we actually want to do. So if we do it, we might, maybe we'll share it with you guys.
Why not?
But there's, some people say it's not valid. Some people say it is. It seems what it does is it measures your delayed immune response, right? Your inflammatory response to foods. And the 5 years ago, and some of them test for like 50 things or 90 things. The one that I work with tests for 190 different foods. So you do a finger prick and you put little blood spots on a card, and then they take the blood that's dried up, right, and they rehydrate it, and then they can take that and break it out into 190 or however many samples, and then they introduce these very specific types of food: goat's cheese, mozzarella cheese, almonds, cashews, everything, and they see if there's a response in it, and then that can be, and it'll there's a range, right? It's either like a low, medium, or high response. So super interesting. You could be eating something every single day that you think is a healthy, good food for you, and your body could be inside like, please stop giving that to me because it's making me so inflamed. So like those are like digestive ones. There's ones that test your omega-3 levels. A lot of people are super deficient in omega-3s or are very high in omega-6s, which comes from processed food, right? So I'll try to keep a high level on each one because I could talk for like half an hour on each one, but that's super interesting too, to see like are some of your ailments and issues from just not having enough omega-3s or too many omega-6s, right? There's and I've done this one, a thyroid adrenal hormone one, so it looks at your cortisol levels throughout the day, right? There should be a nice curve of when your body is producing cortisol. It'll show you if that's out of whack. It looks at your estrogen to progesterone, your testosterone, the ratios of your hormones together. How is your thyroid functioning? How is your blood sugar functioning? So that one's super interesting too. The one I'm learning about right now is the hair tissue mineral analysis, which is actually a hair sample. And this we did on our daughter early on because this was an area that we felt like, is she high in heavy metals that we just have no idea about? And we hadn't really had any other way to test it, right? Is she high in, is she deficient in nutrients, right? Your hair will show all of that, right? It's showing what your body's excreting or is lacking, right? So it's super interesting. So we did that too. So it's all different ways to kind of just show the same thing, right? Where are you deficient? Where are you way out of balance? And I think once you start studying this and seeing how these results, right? We do a lot of case studies in my program. So it's like, here's real results. Here's the symptoms. Here's the testing. Here's what we did to try to balance that person out. and here's how it turned out, right? And I find it fascinating. So our hope is that someday this will become more affordable in the sense that people can use HSA money. I know there's work being done to try to get some of this covered under insurance, or at least through HSAs, which blows my mind that stuff like this isn't covered, because my HSA, I can go to CVS and buy 15 things of Tylenol with my HSA funds, but I can't purchase a functional lab test to show me
It's
where
not
my
even Tylenol. You can buy toothpaste, you can buy toilet paper.
But I can't
But you
buy
can't get
supplements,
functional
high
testing.
quality supplements that are tested.
It's
So we are just hoping and waiting for, and I think there's a shift there, right? I think this is so needed, right? And I think that more and more people are getting turned on to it. Like I said, like 5 years ago, I knew almost nothing about this. I knew that it was a thing, but I really didn't know anything about it. And now I'm literally finishing a program on, how to help other people with this service, right?
Yeah.
This type of work. So,
And I think just coming out of that, the one thing just to kind of just close the loop on it is just sort of, so you go down this path, you get these results, and then sort of what is the outcome, or what do I sort of take away from that appointment with?
I think getting to see what's going on in your body can be a huge light bulb, right? If you're maybe you're a little hesitant, you're not really believing that this is going to uncover something, and then when you see on paper, oh my gosh, my vitamin B is like so deficient, I'm so low on sodium, my hormones, I can see this data that shows me where I should be and where I am. And I think it really can be eye-opening to people of like, oh wow, like that's, even if I'm not a trained professional, I can tell that's not good. And then it's, well, how do we fix this, right? So then the goal is looking at the labs, trying to understand by talking to the person, right? You need to understand the person fully, or as well as you can, right? Seeing the labs, and then coming up with a plan. Is there some supplementation that's needed, right? Is there some diet changes, especially if you do like a food sensitivity? That one's pretty easy, right? You walk away with a plan of, hey, these things are inflaming you, don't eat them for a certain period of time, and then slowly reintroduce it, right? So the goal is get the labs done, see what's going on, and then come up with a plan of, these are the things we want to introduce. There's a time period, right? You didn't get sick overnight, you're not going to get better overnight, right? So I think it's like having that mindset of, this is a gradual thing that needs to be done slowly, right? You don't want to change things overnight anyway in your body. But so that's really the goal, is having a plan that could involve some supplements, some dietary changes, some lifestyle changes, and then checking in periodically. And the goal is not to, honestly, you would hope that people, you almost want to give them the tools so that they can then manage it on their own. The goal is not to have you having an appointment every month for the rest of your life with a practitioner, right? The goal is meeting with them in the beginning, having, helping the client, right, to feel better, to get a plan, to make progress, right, move in the right direction. And then it's maybe periodically checking in. If you're feeling better, you don't need to check in all the time, but maybe once a year, you want to rerun a couple tests just to see, or you start feeling off again. Okay, let's revisit these things. But our goal with both sides of what we're trying to do is to give people the tools to manage it on their own long term, right? And even our practitioner now, we reach out if we have questions. We periodically will touch base with her just to kind of do a status check, because thankfully our daughter's doing so well, and we're both clients of hers too, right? So if we have something going on, we'll reach back out, but we're not on a regimented schedule with her anymore because we don't need to be. And so the goal is that you walk away with that data and then implement a plan to kind of fix those imbalances, see what works, see what doesn't, and hopefully then take back control of your health and your wellness is the ultimate goal.
Love it. Perfect. All right, well, I think that pretty much puts us at time. Thanks for walking us through that, sharing some of your knowledge with us.
Next time will be Nick's turn. Some stuff.
No, super interesting stuff, and I know we covered a lot of topics and kind of hopefully gave you a good overview and gave you some things to take away and dive into further. But we'll be going into each one of those, I'm sure, in detail, and we can, as Andrew said, we could do a half an hour on sort of one of those topics, and we'll really break apart the whole process dive into insurance and the financials and kind of dealing with that and managing that. And then, next time we'll talk a little bit about mental health and mental health coaching and meditation and solving the issues in the body, getting the body balanced, and then we'll talk about getting the mind balanced, and we'll just keep rolling from there. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.